Okay, YouTubers, this is Joe from ArtAlienTV, back on Mars, Gale Crater again, back to Mount Sharp. Now, I'm going to do a quick instructional video here on how to enhance these images. I have shown this in a lot of previous videos I've done, but I'm going to try and go through it step by step to show you how I enhance these images and improve them and de-unenhance them, because they have been heavily compressed and damaged largely by JPL, not NASA. JPL are doing this. I actually did have an email from someone from NASA recently saying that it's nothing to do with them. It's JPL that are obfuscating and mucking around with these images and putting fake sand and stuff like that in over objects that are interesting. So, right, let's crack on with it. Now, the images I'm looking at today are from Sol 1099 and Sol 1100. Now, the weird thing is, you will find that in some sets of images, like this set here, this is Sol 1100, sorry, this is Sol 1099, you get a lot of the brown images, which are in colour, and you scroll down to the bottom here, and you have two in black and white, in grayscale. And these are actually better quality than the colour images, because they haven't been downsized so much. They haven't been compressed as much. So basically, when you look at them up close, they do have this like grid, like matrix grid over them, but you can get rid of that by blurring the image. I'll show you how to do that. But they are actually better than the equivalent images in colour, because the colour images have been downsized. So, right, I've got them in my folder here. I'll have links to all these images, by the way, as usual. I've got them in my folder here. And what I'll do, I'll show you a raw image. Let me show you a raw image of this to start with. Now, this is already been cropped down by NASA. This image would have been larger, and it's also been downsized and compressed. So, it looks okay until you zoom in, and as soon as you zoom in, you'll see loads of image artifacts over it. You can see all these terrible blocks everywhere, these square blocks. These are compression blocks, and a lot of people are doing videos or posting images on Facebook and various other places of things they think they've found in some of these images, but in fact what they're doing is they are often enhancing these compression blocks, which add false detail to the image and obscure the real detail. Now, in order to see what's really in the image, you have to get rid of that first. And the way I do it, there are other ways of doing this, but the way I do it is I get it into my graphics processor. Now I'll just show you the enhanced version I've got of that same image. Now, this has been enlarged. I've increased the pixel density, and I've white balanced it, and I've upped the contrast. And it's still a bit dark, actually. I should brighten it a bit more. But you can see that when you zoom in, it's actually not too bad. It's not brilliant, but I've probably improved the image by about 40 or 50%, but it's still not as good as the original photograph. It's probably up to about 70% of the original photograph now. So I've actually managed to restore some of the information in this image by enhancing it and making it look like a real photograph. Probably more like the original photograph would have looked like. And you can see here some very interesting structures on Mount Sharp. I think this is Logan Pass here. Now, the rover at some point is supposed to drive up here, but I actually think they won't, because there's so many buildings and what look like intelligent structures up here. It's going to be very difficult for them to drive up here without actually photographing these structures. They may find a way of doing that. They may find a way of just photographing pebbles like they normally do and drilling holes in the ground and not showing us images of these buildings. But there are buildings up here, and lots of people have found them. Some people have said this is a pyramid. This is not a pyramid. It's just a pointed rock. I mean, I could be wrong, but that thing there looks natural. It is rather pointed. But there are some structures here, up here especially, up on this ridge. But this is from the colour image, as I said. So the original image I worked from here wasn't very good. So what I did, I went to, now that's Sol 1100, I just showed you that image. If you go to Sol 999, which I've got here somewhere. Hang on a minute. Which is just here. This is Sol 999. Sorry, 1099. 1000, yeah, 1099. And you've got the same area covered by the camera, but the images are black and white. Okay, so that is Logan Pass there on this one, and that's the same there from a slightly different angle. So what I did is I got the black and white images and I enhanced them instead. Now here's the original black and white image, and when you zoom into this, you've got this kind of grid going over it. So what you need to do first of all is get rid of this grid, because it spoils the image and makes it look fuzzy. But you can see, actually, there's a very rectilinear, square-looking structure building here on this kind of mountainside here. Okay, it looks like a ruined building. Right, so I'll show you that in my processor, and I'll try and run through the steps one by one as I took. Now, here's the same image that I've enhanced. I've enlarged it again. I've actually upped the color temperature as well. Now I got rid of that grid blur by using the Gaussian blur around 1%, I think about 1%, and I've added some color temperature to it to give it a bit of color. And here's that building, very clearly square, rectangular parts to it here. That is not a rock. That is a building. I do appreciate this is quite a long way off from the rover. It could be a mile away, it could be a kilometre, it could be less. Don't know exactly. But there's definitely a building here, and there are lots of other structures up here. There's one here that looks a bit like a pyramid, and some buildings here, but they're very vague. Now, unfortunately, this part of the mountainside, the rock here is very bright, and it's hard to get any contrast in there. So there are ways around that. But this looks like construction, and this rock here, this very light coloured rock, is way brighter than all the surrounding rock in the foreground. And a lot of it looks artificial. There are all sorts of things up here, like mounds and ruined building. This looks like a building here with a wall here and another wall here, and there's various little towers and buildings. Now, they are dilapidated, they look ruined, so at first glance they look natural, but they're not. This is a building. This is absolutely a building. You can see the square corners to it there, and that has only been basically enhanced. I haven't gone in and done much to that really at all. I'll show you how I did it. I'll get the raw image here, and here's a close-up, incidentally, here's a close-up of that building. There we go. Absolutely perfect right angles there. This is what looks to be some kind of castle or structure that has been blown up or destroyed, but there's still some of the walls intact, partially intact. It looks like a ruined castle or some kind of building. What can I say? I mean, there are clear right angles there, which you can see on that corner especially. Absolutely clear. But you really had to do quite a lot of contrast in the image to get to see that properly. So what I'll do, I've got the black and white version of the image here, and you've got all this. When you zoom in, you've got all these dots and grid sort of pattern on it. So the first thing I do is to blur it and use Gaussian blur. I think actually it was Chris from Mars Anomalies who first showed me how to do this in one of his videos. And if you do it by, say, a radius of 1, they magically disappear. But then the picture does look a little bit foggy, unfortunately. So then you have to try and get some of that sharpness back into the image. Now, what I normally do is enlarge the image. Now, it's 200 pixels per inch, and I just add a 0 in there to make it 2000. That sounds excessive, but it's just easier and quicker to enlarge it by a symmetrical number. Just add a 0, it's much easier than any other number. And then I'll enlarge it to approximately about 3 times the size of the image. So, and it's 1344 pixels wide. So I'm gonna go up to about 3000. It's not quite 3 times, but it's approximately. If you go more than about 4 or 5 times larger, the image gets too vague. You don't want to go too too high. Sorry, get my teeth in there. So now I've enlarged it, and that actually helps smooth the image out. And now you've got none of this blocky pixelation and compression blocks that you've got in the colour images, because this hasn't been so badly compressed. Okay, and then when you look up here, you can see that fairly clearly. Now, what we need to do now is get some contrast in the image and really bring the shadows out so we can see the shapes. So I'll go to Shift B, brightness and contrast. Now, what I usually do is darken it to start with, quite heavily. So I'm going to go minus 15, plus 15, that's brightness and contrast. Okay, do that again actually. And now we can see some shadows. And now it's starting to look like an actual photograph. And it's not bad. This is not a bad image. Surprised, I usually used to avoid black and white images because of this grid they put over it, but they are actually better. There's none of these blocks, so it's a fairly smooth image, and especially when you enlarge it like I just did, it will smooth the image out and make it look more natural. Okay, now the other thing I did was just add some colour to it. Now what you've got to do with this black and white image is increase the colour depth first. So is what I just done there, and then I'll go to automatic colour balance, and I'll add some warmth to it to make it look like it's got a bit of colour. So we're going to sort of incandescent bulb. It will go a bit orange if you go too far, and let's go to about there. There we go, and now it looks more like a mountain. And you can start to see now that there are some structures up here. But when I look at these things, the problem is when you have lots of contrasting parts to the image, you have quite a lot of dark shadow in the foreground as it's closer, and darker rock, and then you have this very light rock behind, with these possible buildings up here. If you contrast the whole image, then some parts of the image are too dark and then some are too bright. So the thing to do really is to use the selection tool and just draw a square around it like this. Zoom in, and then do that part of the image separately and really add some contrast to it like that. And now you can see, I'll brighten that a bit as well. It's going a bit dark. Let's go to bright and then bright again. There you can see that corner and this wall here. So that looks like an intelligent structure. There are many things like this on Mount Sharp, and I really do think the reason why they are obfuscating and destroying a lot of the image information is purely so that we can't see this detail, and it's usually too far away and too vague to actually see anything. I'm sure this is exactly why they do it, but that's how I enhance the background images. I use a similar technique with foreground stuff as well. Now obviously if I was going to put this in a video, I would clip this out like I've done here. I've already got the clips. Here's the one clip, and then there's the sort of more enhanced clip. But I took a bit more time with that and darkened it more carefully and got the contrast just right. If you push it too hard, it will break up. If you don't push it far enough, you won't see the shadows. So it's a fine line really between these things. And also, if you get in too close to these things, like if you zoom in real close, a lot of people are doing this. They're clipping finds on Mars and they're zooming right into the object, but this is not the way to do it. You've got to sit back, give the object a bit of space, give it a little bit of distance, and actually it will look better from further back like this. If you go in too close to something and put that in a video or on Facebook, it's just going to look like a load of blurry rubbish. So anyone out there who watches these videos who does like to clip these images, keep at it, keep searching, but don't get in too close, especially with things on the ground in the foreground. I'll show you something else that I was looking at here. I got this other image up from the same Sol, and this is another example of something that may or may not be an anomaly. And this is from Sol 1099 again, and let's go back to the, yeah, there it is. Yeah, there's something that looks a bit like a statue head here. Now it may not be. This probably is just a rock, that happens to have broken and split in a certain way to look a bit like a humanoid statue head. So now I've got this. Actually, it'd be quicker if I just download it again from here. Let's get the full resolution version. But this is one of the colour images, and it's not as good as the black and white ones, unfortunately. Let's just save that to the desktop, and I'll just show you an example of how I may as well just save it in there, haven't I? Yeah, okay. No, let's go yeah, let's go there. Okay. Okie doke. Right. I'll try not to take too long here. We could go on for hours about how I do this, but I'm just trying to show you the basics of how to get the images to look like actual photographs, because really a lot of them do not. They really do look terrible, and there are ways around this. There are ways of enhancing these images. But if you see the black and white images, go for them. They are better. They haven't been over compressed as much as the colour ones. Right, now we want that image there. Let's get rid of that. I won't save that because I've already done this image. I'll get rid of that. Okay. Now I'll show you this foreground image. Now the problem is with the foreground stuff is that the camera, the Mastcam on the Rover, it has the focus set to infinity, which means that the autofocus just kind of focuses poorly on everything. So nothing looks sharp when you zoom in. And add to that the fact that the images have been compressed and have all these horrible blocks over them, you've lost a lot of detail. But this does kind of look a bit like a statue head with a couple of eyes and a nose and possibly a mouth and chin here. But this is probably a trick of the light. I appreciate that. This is not a very clear anomaly. And what I'll do is I'll crop that out. Now, when I crop it, I always try and crop it to sort of 12, what's the resolution? 720-ish kind of size or ratio, the aspect ratio. So this will fit in a video player nicely. And it's usually that kind of window box shape, letterbox almost shape, like your widescreen TV. Because basically, if you're going to do a full HD video, you need to get the images to fit your actual player and software. Now, I'll do exactly the same as what I did before on the other background image, and I will enlarge it. I'll stick a 0 in there. But this time, I'm only going to go up to 1280, because the width is 270, so I mean, really should go a bit less, but 1280 is near enough 4 or 5 times the size. And what that will do instantly is smooth the image out slightly. And now I will crop it down to 720 high so that it's the right size to go in the player or viewer on the video software. And when you see the video, it will fill the screen and not have black borders around the edge, either side or whatever. So let's go just below center there, like that. Now, normally I wouldn't go in this close. I would do other further back zooms on this. This is a close-up, but I'll just show you how I get rid of that. I'll do the blur first. Always blur first. Where's the blur? Gaussian blur. Now, this may take more than one radius because these images are worse. Usually about 1.4. Let's have a look. That would probably do it. It's not perfect, but if you go too far with the blur, it just ruins the image completely. This is why they do this, I'm sure. But you can see it's cleaned it up a bit. Now I'll white balance it. I always do it in this order, and I use the automatic color balance. Now I've got a preset on here, which is 5600, which is near sunlight. Now that just restores the blues into the image that are probably actually there and makes it look like it should. Okay, now I will darken it. Let's go quite heavy. That's too much. Let's go to about -5. I've got presets here already set up, different types of contrast and brightness here. That's about right. Now what I'll do is I'll use the clarify tool, perhaps. That might actually not help. Yeah, that helps. That adds more contrast and brightness. But you can see now that it doesn't look so much like a statue head, because I mean, that kind of looks like an eye socket. That looks like an eye. This looks a bit like a nose here, which is kind of broken. And that kind of does look a bit like a mouth. But this is probably matrixing. This is probably pareidolia that I'm suffering from here. We all have it, apparently, according to NASA. But who knows? It could be. It could be a broken statue. I have found many, but most of them are a lot clearer and better than this. And when you're getting real close like this, it doesn't actually help. It helps if you look at it smaller. And sometimes what I do, if I've gone in too close with a video, too close to the anomaly or potential statue head or whatever it might be, what I do is I put the video up in 720 instead of full HD, because then people will watch it on a smaller viewer, and actually that can help. So if you've gone in too close to an object, do the video in a smaller size, and then people will watch it on a smaller screen, which will be about this big on their laptop or whatever, and it looks okay. But if you see that full screen, it'd be like the detail's too close. Getting too close does not make you see more. You have to get the distance between your view and the object about correct, and looking at these things smaller usually helps. Now, what I often do sometimes as well with these is I'll go in with the sharpen tool and just sharpen up some of the detail in the actual anomaly or possible anomaly. Go around and sharpen it up a little bit, but that can make the image break up and doesn't usually help much. The other way to brighten these up is to go in with the light and darken tool, or the burn tool, which is what a lot of people use, and you can just brighten up some of the edges just subtly like this, so that you can see what's going on in the image a bit more, and maybe darken some of the shadows a little bit, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, that's just very crudely done. You have to take your time with that, and you've got to be careful not to add detail that isn't already there, because you will get accused of embellishing the images and making them into something they're not. So there we go. That was a quick instruction on how to bring out background and foreground anomalies. But the best area really is to find anything really interesting is in the foreground. But most of it, 99.9% of it, is just rocks. And there's a lot of people out there who are showing little piles of rocks and saying it's this and saying it's that, when it doesn't even look like it. A recent example was the so-called spaceship on Mars, which actually, in the image, is only about a foot long, sticking up. It's an interesting rock and probably is a part of something interesting and not just a rock. But the problem is people don't seem to understand the scale of the things they're looking at, and they're saying this is a spaceship or a UFO, and it's only a foot long or a few inches long. That is nonsensical, and people need to get a sense of scale. Right, I'll demonstrate that here. Now, there's this image here. I've got this up in my player here. This image is one from a previous video. It's called Water, Shipwreck and Alien Building Complex on Mars. Now, this covers the same area, funnily enough, but this was taken from an earlier sol. I think this is 1074, so this is a couple of weeks further back. But this is exactly the same spot. Now, but this was closer. For some reason, the rover was closer to this possible ship here, shipwreck, or whatever it is. It could be a building that's collapsed, but it looks to me like a shipwreck that's listed over, and it even has what looks like a couple of symbols here, like an M and an R, but that it may be coincidental. But I'll show you this from a later sol, the same spot, because these anomalies often crop up in later sols, and sometimes they're closer, sometimes they're not. But sometimes they're taken at a different time of day, and the lighting is better. So let me show you that. Here we go. Now this is from that same image I just showed you. Or no, it's from the one next to it. The one I just showed you here, which was that one, the black and white one. The other black and white one, which is this one here, has that ship, possible ship structure here. You can just see it down here. And I do wonder whether that's why they've done this to the image. But I'll show you the enhancement, which is this one. And you can still see it. It's definitely there. And there are some definite rectangular and interesting structures in here, like this bit up here, but you can't see it very well because it's quite vague. So you need to go in and actually clip that part of the image, like I've done here. I'll clip that out, and then you go in with the contrast. And the best way to do that is to select around it like I showed you. And then I've upped the colour temperature there just to give it some warmth and make it stand out on a mobile device as well. And then I just go in heavier and go in with the contrast. I've gone in with the light and darken tool a little bit there and darkened some of these lines, but they were already there. You can actually see them in the image first. You can see these dark lines here, and here, and here, and here, and around here. And all I did was accentuate those and lighten the lighter parts as well to give it more clarity. But you can't sharpen it much because it's still quite a way off from the Rover, and if you over sharpen it, it will break up. So there is a limit to how far you can push these images, but it's knowing when to stop. Now I could have gone on and on and on with this, and I just brightened it a bit more there and clarified it a bit more. And there is definitely something here. Whether it's a ship, could be. Is it a building? Could be. Could be a number of structures together here, actually. Looking at it now in greater detail. Who's to say? Who's to say for sure? But it certainly looks intelligent because there are very straight structures in here. So there we go. That's how I do it. I'll try not to go on too long. I think that's about it for this video. I'll put links to these in the description below that you can see. But don't be put off if you see a black and white image like this on the Curiosity page on here, like here. Where is it? There we go. Don't be put off. They are actually clearer. They're clearer and sharper because they haven't been downsized so much. And let's compare the actual image size here. Okay, now this one here, 289 kilobytes. That's the one with the potential statue head in, which is probably just a rock. Okay, 289 kilobytes. Now let's have a look at the black and white one up here, and it's 338. So it's a bit bigger. I mean, so there's more information in there, and that is all light and shadow, that information. So there's actually a lot more detail in here because they haven't. If you add color to an image, it adds more information to it, but it doesn't make it necessarily any better. It's just adding color information. This is pure light and shadow. This is actually better. So if you ever see these on the page, when you go on the NASA website or when you go on Midnight Planets or wherever you get your rover images from, just don't be put off by it. They are good. You just got to know how to get rid of the grid on them, and they are actually a lot better. So you will get more detail from these. So there we go. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you soon.